The marvelous ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. Is you quite snugly there in your nightie? You isn't frigid cold? I'm fine. I cannot help thinking about your poor mother and father. By now they must be dripping and scumping all over the house, shouting, hello, hello, where is Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and father. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumplet. Is you not missing them very badly? Not really, because I never knew them. You is making me sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. But don't be sad. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We are all orphans in there. You is an orphan? Yes. How many is there in there? 10 of us, all little girls. Was you happy there? I hated it. The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out at bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. How is you getting punished? She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink. The rotten old rot wrapper? It was horrid. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about. The filthy old fizzwiggler. That is the horridest thing I is hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever. And all at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. 1 minute he's telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clonkers locked us in a cellar. The thing that worries me is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I? All is my fault. I is the one who kid-snatched you. Yet another enormous tear welled from his eyes and splashed onto the floor. Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long, Sophie said. I is afraid you will. No, I won't. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never letting that happen. For a few moments, the cave was silent, and then Sophie asked, May I ask you a question? The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. Shoot away. Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it? Aha! Cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. Now he's getting nosier than a Parker. And the suitcase you were carrying, what on earth was that all about? The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table. You is asking me to tell you wopsy big secrets that nobody's ever hearing before. I won't tell a soul. I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck in here for the rest of my life. You would be telling the other giants. No, I couldn't. You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me. And so they would, you as a human being. And human beings is like strawbuckles and cream to those giants. Well, if they are going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything, would I? You wouldn't? Then why did you say I might? Because I is brimful of buzzburgers. If you listen to everything I am saying, you will be getting an earache. Please tell me what you were doing in our village. I promise you could trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on. I would so much love to have a jumbly big elephant to go riding through the green forest, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling, hot, muck-frumping country we is living in. Nothing grows in it except snozzcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant and peachy fruits as well. Now, tell me what you were doing in our village. If you is really wanting to know what I am doing in your village, I is blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream? What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant. When all the other giants is galloping off every what way in which to swallow human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams, dreams that is giving the dreamers a happy time. Now hang on a minute. Where do you get these dreams? I collect them, the BFG said, waving an arm towards all the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves. I has billions of them. You can't collect a dream. A dream isn't something you can catch a hold of. You is never going to understand about it. That is why I is not wishing to tell you. Oh, please tell me. I will understand. Go on. Tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything. The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs. Dreams is very mysterious things. They is floating around in the air like little whipsy, misty bubbles. And all the time they is searching for sleepy people. Can you see them? Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Aha! Now he's getting on to the dark and dusty secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited. A dream, as it goes whiffling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzy humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it. Can you hear it? The BFG pointed up to his enormous truck wheel ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? How can I miss them? Sophie said. They may be is looking a bit preposterous to you, but you must believe me when I say they is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things I can't hear? You is deaf as a dumpling compared with me. You is hearing only thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours, but I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? In your country, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly? Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loudly. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet like going clumpity, clumpity, clump like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, what else can you hear? I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil. You mean you could hear ants talking? Every single word, although I is not much understanding their language. Go on. Sometimes on a very clear night, and if I squiggle my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upward so they were facing the ceiling. If I is squiggling them like this and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me you was watching me from out the window last night. But I didn't make a sound. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, loud as a drum. Go on, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? They is not exactly talking, but they is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I could hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it. How awful. It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone twisted your arm right off. Is that really true? You think I is swizzle fiddling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping right here. I was not wishing to be called a pipster. Oh, no, I'm not calling you anything. I believe you. I do, really. Please go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him, and she could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbling to you. I know you wouldn't, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that. So do please forgive me and go on. He waited a while longer, and then he said, it is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into the trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of a tree. What sort of sound? A soft moaning sound. It is like the sound of an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused, the cave very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourselves, but some is like glorious music. He seemed almost to be transfigured by excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me something more about them, Sophie said quietly. You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Only the mices know that. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is singing sweeter than any nightingale. What else do you hear? One of the biggest chatterbags is the cattle piddlers. What do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all they is ever talking about. Is there a dream floating around in here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that way, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often come into giant country. How do you catch them? The same way you is catching buttery flies, that with a net. He stood up and crossed over to the corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net at the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry. It's time for eats.